shati, maji nanywa ya kanjo yako ya chupa za mapambo, nalipia mtoto wako elimu ya bure ya juu, unanipa ya bure lakini ya utu. Oh no. So nitapata wapi majibu ya maswali? Mahindi lienda wapi? Pia shilingi ya shule za msingi. Paula mtume, mbona jela usimtume? Lazima abuniwe tume. Lazima abuniwe tume. Mapenzi ndizo hali mabasa tulificha kwa kabati. Kazi kwa vijana, pesa kwa wazee. Tulimangamanga mpaka za maded aise. Lazima abuniwe tume. Lazima abuniwe tume. Oh. Sheria. Oh. Sheria. Sheria. Fuata. Sheria. Sheria. Oh, oh. Sheria. Yeah, yeah. Fuata. Sheria. 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 Oh, oh. Fuata. Sheria. Sheria. Pia wewe mwananchi, tabia zako ziko chini. Unapenda kulipa hongo na kutumia njia za uongo. Una mipango na hata watoto wa kando, haujui hata majina yao. Kura yako uliuza maini figo, ukakulia hadi dini, kisha wasema tukuthamini, na wewe hapo hauaminiki. Na wewe hapo haupangiki.
Wapi kidero when you need to slap somebody? Complain ufisadi kwani ulidhani t-shirt 50 bob leso siku ya campaign ilikuwa free? Ni 5 year loan investment, utalipa kingi ya parliament. We are one, amani we are one. Na utumishi kwa wote, utu missing CCTV we were watching. Racial insecurity na job opportunity ni kama mti ya kibiriti. Side moja heavy, usiniambie Kenya kuna umaskini, kwani hizi fat fingers zinaibia nane? Maskando inatuletea wa survival. Media define leadership, na sura ukiaka front page na improve readership. Ambia wase wa Twitter wa hashtag hii ama hash reality doesn't make a good TT. Commission of inquiry wanakula commission bila kutupa ukweli. Ni kubaya mpaka kukiwa kuzuri unashindwa nini mbaya. Machozi ya perpetrator ineza dilute damu ya victim ilimwagika. After all is said and done, all will be said, nothing will be done. You're not my tribe, but you're my blood type. Like it doesn't have to take tragedy to know that.
Sheria. Sheria.
All right, and a very, 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 very good afternoon to you. Thank you for joining us right here on Sheria Dive. We're there? Tuko sawa? Tuko sawa? Tuko sawa? Tuko hapa kwa studio manze, tunapata shida za mitambo. I don't know if you can hear. We're good. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Sheria Dive right here on Pawa Radio with me, James WaNjeri, Wakili Local. Yeah? So this is a show where we talk about the law and today we're talking about abductions and torture. We'll be talking about disappearance, and we'll just actually be looking. The beauty about Kenya is that for all the faults we have as a country, we also have a very robust judiciary. Today, I'll be giving you stories about people who actually underwent abductions at the hands of the state, torture, what stories they took to court, and what the court determined when they listened to those stories. But as well, of course, we know that at the moment, yesterday, there was a shocking discovery that was made in Kware area, right next to the police station. By noon yesterday, about 6 bodies had been fished out of the water, and most of them had been put in gunias and others in bags that looked like they had been tied very professionally. Now, I think as of today, those bodies have already gotten to about 12. It's doubled. What's happening in Kenya, man? And I know for a lot of people, some of this news is coming out as very shocking because it's hard to believe that this is a country we have. But let's talk about it. It's always been said, those who fail to learn from history are bound to repeat the mistakes of the past. And what we're not gonna do is repeat the mistakes of the past. So we're gonna give a voice to those people whose voices were taken away from them and see what exactly can we learn from that. But of course, even as we do that, we're going to be having fun. It looks like it's going to rain today. It's not sundress weather at all. So wherever you are, please be safe. Squeezy Manze, you even have to tell people where you're going. I know men are struggling with this. You know, like you have to share a live location. You just see a Subaru coming. Unaanza kuingia njeve manze. So anyway, thank you for joining us. I know there are guys who are probably listening to this show for the first time. This is how we do it. We're going to be here with you until 3 p.m. and we're going to be doing a lot of learning and getting a lot of good music. Remember, you can give us your feedback, your questions, anything you want to ask on the socials at Power Radio, and you can reach me at James K. WaNjeri on the socials. And remember, if you're watching this on YouTube on the live chat function is open, so you could as well ask your questions there. I'm going to be looking at them and responding to those questions. So this is radio, right? It's not a podcast. So let's get some music.
Power Radio. Tune in and power up.
Mzee alisema hakuna cha bure. Huo msemo tumeutafsiri kinyume. Hata shule kuingiza mtoto lazima utoe mchoto. Kupata simu ni bala, road license bei nafuu utanunua. Kupoteza ID ni mashaka, twarudisha jamhuri yetu nyuma. Nchi ya kitu kidogo ni nchi ya watu wadogo. Ukitaka chai ewe ndugu, nenda Limuru. Hata nyumbani ukipatwa na majambazi, kupiga 99 masema sisi hatuna gari. Lete 5,000 ya petroli, zaidi ya utumishi. Mahakamani hela ndiyo haki, kwa 1,000 chache mshtakiwa ndiwe mshtaki. Utajiri huwa ushahidi, twarudisha jamhuri yetu nyuma. Jamani, nchi ya kitu kidogo ni nchi ya watu wadogo. Ukitaka soda ewe inspector, burudika na Fanta. Nchi ya kitu kidogo Kenyatta, madawa zimeisha, mashiti za uzwa marikiti 100 kwa 100. Wafanyi kazi waenda miezi bila pesa, ni bahati ukitibiwa. Mzigo wetu unazidi kuwa mzito, watoto wanena mshahara wa 2500 ya vitabu na viatu na vyakula. Nauliza na mbotela, je, huu ni ungwana? Nchi ya kitu kidogo, ni nchi ya watu wadogo. Ukitaka chai ewe ndugu, nenda Limuru. Nchi ya kitu kidogo, ni nchi ya watu wadogo. Ukitaka chai ewe mama, nunua Ketepa.
Tushasikia Wadaklis tushasikia tukiingia ni kublast huko ngabadu na chuklo wa madam, so anguka nao itabaki meflow na vibe. Anguka nao kako single for now. Mdaglis mteja patikani hadi late night saa 6 ndo taniwai. Nikupin location na nikofana na hii sukate call niko chomba ya G. Mina jua utakuwa irizo riris. Acha nikushow kwanza form ya Didon. Nishashika mpua na twende chini kwa chini akiwa adi na mini. Sasa tunasikiza Shin City tuna feel free. Teka video na post pale NGC. Jina ni Kantel kurapsi ni talent G. Anguka nao anguka nao cheki. Anguka nao twende down low now. Stand up to your feet mikono juu alafu click. Tuliza pesa alafu one leg. Anguka nao one leg. Anguka nao anguka nao anguka nao anguka nao
anguka nayo kama uko na new catch anguka nayo kona pati na magwash anguka nayo round 2 kwa hii bash anguka nayo ati anguka nayo ati anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo ati anguka nayo ati anguka nayo na katika msupa webanjuka cheza chini ukikondezo madhuta anguka nayo baby girl ushaitika mdagi matisho za wadagi step ama darling tambu serikali juni serikali tamka asali simnajua ni nani flow mshati ki don medunga up down ni chi utekiwa poa daily ti sikia beba anguka nao anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo ati anguka nayo mtupa me feel relaxed anguka nayo kama uko na new catch anguka nayo kama unapati na magwash anguka nayo round 2 kwa hii bash ati
anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo
ati anguka nayo kama uko na new catch anguka nayo kona pati na magwash anguka nayo round 2 kwa hii bash anguka nayo ati
anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo anguka nayo
It sounds like there's a revolution in the air. Kenya is changing, man. And this is Sheria Dive, where we talk about all things legal. Thank you for everyone who's joining us. I know there's some guys joining us for the first time. Just want to give you a very big welcome. Karibuni sana. Ukitoka hapa unatoka na diploma ya law, manze. That's what we're trying to do. So remember, if you want to ask any questions about the discussion we're having today, we're talking about detention. We're talking about police abductions. Did you know that this is not actually a new thing in Kenya? We're going to look back at history because there was a time in this country where you couldn't say some of the things you us guys are saying to the president today. Ruto must go. Bro, those things you could not have said them. There was a time you couldn't have said them. And the reason we're having this conversation today is just to understand, how did Kenya get to where it is today? And why is it that there are things the Constitution is very clear about? Those things are not just there by chance, right? So we're going to be talking about that today. So if you have any questions, we have our YouTube chat is live. You could as well just post your questions there. But remember as well, you can also just go ahead and send your questions to us on at Pawa Radio or at James K. WaNjeri. We're going to be looking at that and we'll give you those responses to those questions. So sawa, asanteni sana. Now, in 2011, some 6 people went to the Constitutional and Human Rights Division of the High Court of Kenya. And each person had filed a separate petition. So that eventually what the court decided is, since you guys are talking about more or less the same things, why don't we just put all these petitions together and hear them as one, okay? Now, one Mr. Jaoko No Oro stated that on 1st April 1989, while attending to the burial arrangements of his late brother, one gentleman called James Obonyo No, he was arrested at the Ofafa Memorial Hall in Kisumu by persons he believed to be plainclothes police officers. Now, he said that upon his arrest, he was taken to his home in Sakwa, Bondo, where the said plainclothes police officers searched his house and his mother's home and impounded several books that belonged to him. He further added that the officers then proceeded to his house in Mosque Estate House, number R377 in Kisumu, where they also impounded several books. He then said he was taken to Kisumu police station, where he was detained overnight, after which he was transferred to Railway police station in Nairobi, where he also stayed for a night. After that, he was blindfolded, forcibly tossed into a car and driven to Spring Valley police station in Nairobi, where he was also detained overnight. He was blindfolded again and taken to another place, which he later learned was the Nyayo House torture chambers, where at the 24th floor, he was heavily interrogated by a panel that was chaired by one Mr. James Opio. Further, he said that for the days he was held at Nyayo House, he was periodically ordered to strip naked and was beaten with rubber whips, broken chair pieces, tire whips, and blows, slaps, and kicks, all to compel him to admit that he was a member of the outlawed Mwakenya organization. Now, according to him, after each session of torture, he was taken to a waterlogged cell where he was sprayed with hot, pressurized water and where he was held for 14 days without food, a sleeping mat, blankets, or drinking water, and that during this period he was held incommunicado. He was later released without charge, and that although he fell ill because of these atrocious conditions, he was not accorded any medical treatment, and to date, he walks with a limp, suffers headaches, ulcers, skin rash, and poor eyesight. And it is for those reasons that he was now coming to court to seek a declaration, number 1, that his rights and freedoms were contravened and grossly violated by the government's special branch police officers. On 1st April 1989, he was held for 14 days at various police stations and thereafter at the Nyayo House torture chambers. He also wanted a declaration that he was entitled to payment of damages and compensation for the violations and contraventions of his fundamental rights and freedoms. He also was seeking for general damages exemplary damages and moral damages under Section 84(2) of the Constitution of Kenya. This was the old constitution for the unconstitutional conduct by the Kenyan government, servants, and agents be awarded to him. Now, I know sisi wote wazee. So what exactly is More Kenya? And why was the government so keen on picking books from people? Okay? Now, in 1982, something happens in Kenya where there's an attempted coup by certain junior officers in the Kenyan Air Force. All right? This was only about 4 years after President Moi, who was the vice president, had taken over from Kenyatta, who had died, of course, in 1978, if you remember your history. But the arrest of those junior officers and their execution was not enough. The government began to feel that there were people now who are advancing revolutionary agendas, okay? And at this time, of course, there was a lot of criticism of the government about corruption, nepotism, and embezzlement of public funds. So when 1982 happened, one of the things the government does is they first make Kenya a one-party state, right? So by de facto, if you remember your history as well, in 1969, there used to be a party called Kenya People's Union, which was led by Jaramogi Oginga Odinga, right? Now, that party was outlawed, and in effect, from 1969, Kenya became a party, a country that had only one party, which was KANU, okay? This decision was then met with a lot of opposition, and especially many of the people who raised their voices against this were university students and university lecturers. At that time, the University of Nairobi became a hotbed of political activities, which was advocating for the repeal of Section 2A of the Constitution. And this is a section of the Constitution that had made Kenya a one-party state. Now, the More Kenya movement was not always a clandestine organization. The people at that time, they believed we're in a free democratic society. So what you're going to do is you're going to advocate and you're going to make noise publicly. So what they would do is...
Should we play music?
Yeah, play music.
Is it still streaming? There's no way. What do we do? Oh boy. Haitachoma vitu.
Oh, but how is it speaking? Because they're saying the career is talking about vitu kuchomwa. We seem to be having a power failure. I don't know what's happening. So if you can hear this, we are safe. So far, at least. So we're working on getting power back. So please give us a few minutes. We just try and get this together. Thank you so much. And we are back. Sorry about that.
Oh my god. Vile tumeanza kuongea. So where we at?
All right, we are back. Sorry about that. Okay, fantastic. Good. Sorry, guys, we seem to be having some power issues. I want to call them issues because I don't want to sound like a conspiracy theorist, right? But yes, things are happening here. But let's keep talking about this. I think earlier before the power went, we're talking about more Kenya. What exactly was more Kenya? Now, universities in
Generator na isizime.
So I'm now gonna need you guys to help me. If you can hear me, just give me a shout out on Twitter or on the live feed on YouTube, just so that I can be sure we can all hear each other. The power keeps coming and going, but you know what? This revolution will not be silenced. Let's do this. So I was talking about more Kenya, just to give us a brief background about what was happening. So remember what we said is that in 1982, 4 years after President Moi took over from Jomo Kenyatta as president, there is an attempted coup that is launched by the Air Force, junior officers in the Air Force. Of course, it's shut down. I think the government had been overthrown maybe by a day or something. So now what happens after that is the government sort of takes up almost a stance where everyone is to be treated with a lot of suspicion. Now, remember at this time, from 1969, Kenya had been a one-party state, right? So what then happens is that students from university, together with their lecturers, then begin to have public lectures talking about this, talking about the need for democracy, all this. And you have to remember as well that it is also during this period that internationally we are still dealing with the Cold War, we are still dealing with questions of communism and all that. So the University of Nairobi became a hotbed of political activities where people were advocating for the repeal of Section 2A. Now, some of the lecturers at the universities are probably people you know very well. Ngugi wa Thiong'o was a lecturer at the in the literature department. Willy Mutunga at the time was a lecturer at the law school, okay? And these names are going to have relevance as we go down the road. Now, what the members of Mwakenya would do, okay, is that they would have public lectures and then they would issue leaflets. And the leaflets they would issue would include Mpatanishi and Mzalendo. And they basically serve the purpose of explaining what the Mwakenya members felt was wrong in the country's political sphere. However, the government then began cracking down on its members and the organization went underground. Now, Ngugi wa Thiong'o Professor Ngugi wa Thiong'o was the movement's spokesman. So in the mid 1970s, the underground movements started cropping up with publications. There was one called Independent Kenya. There was another one called Pambana Publication. And it was from Pambana Publication that Kenya actually arose. All right? Now, after, of course, the attempted coup of 1982, the government now began to crack down on who are the traitors. And that word, I use it very, very clearly and very intentionally, because the government had actually taken the position that there were traitors within the state. And you will remember we were all called traitors, I think 2 weeks ago, traitors and criminals. So my fellow traitors and criminals out there, viva. So the government then began to arrest people. Some of the prominent people arrested were Maina wa Kinyati, Professor Katama Mkangi, WaNjeri Kihoro, and Paddy Onyango. And how this would be done is plainclothes police officers will just stand up and pick you and you disappear. But then the government, realizing that the university was actually becoming a place where, according to them, radicalization was happening, plainclothes police infiltrated the university, and students were actually recruited by the government to monitor what was being taught in the classrooms. Now, the government wanted to focus on some of the lecturers who taught what we call Marxist-Leninist theories. Now, Karl Marx and Lenin, these guys were promoting what you'd call today, they were promoting socialist policies, okay? And they were identified with communism. So, it was deliberate by the government to pursue it as a fight against communism. Because remember, at the time, we had the Cold War, and that had still not ended. And to get the support of the West, if you are shown to be fighting communism, then of course the Western powers, America and the rest, will quickly come to assist a country like that, okay? Now, those who were arrested were tortured and were subjected to various human rights violations. And you would be tortured until you accept that you are a member of Kenya, and then you give information to the government on the other members. Now, in 1989 in London, Moi actually said these words. These were the words Moi said. London, 1989, Moi said, "We only torture detained members of the disruptive dissident group Kenya. Otherwise, how are we going to get important information from them? They are out to destroy everything we value in our society." And much of this torture actually took place at the Nyayo House and Nyati House in Nairobi. Nyati House, by the way, is where tulikuwa tunapigwa tear gas on the Tuesdays and Thursdays, because it's the road where you have the Barclays Plaza. There's a building there that's a very quiet building called Nyati House, but the walls of that building, if the walls could speak, they would tell you the stories of the people who were screaming. And right on that lane was Nyayo House. Nyayo House is a building that now houses the immigration. But people didn't know. They'd walk in and out of that building not knowing that in the basement of that building, there were people who were being held and they were being tortured, and you couldn't hear anything. As a matter of fact, those days, we used to have a lot of people dying by suicide from the top of Nyayo House. But later it became clear that what was actually happening was the government will to the past. So as we talk about protecting the democratic space, as we talk about freedom of speech, as we talk about is this a place we've been at before, and how do we prevent that from happening? Okay, so it looks like we've sorted our power issues for now. Thank you for staying with us. Let's get some music, and then when we come back, we continue to look at that petition where 6 people went to court and said, we were tortured and this is what happened to us. Are there any similarities with what police are doing today? This is Sheria Dive right here on Power Radio.
Power Radio. Tune in and power up. Pawa Radio. Tune in and power up.
This is turning out to be a podcast, guys. This is becoming a podcast. We are still dealing with our power challenges here, so that's fine. Let's continue with this. So these people then bring petitions to the court to try and say this is actually what happened to us. Now, the second petitioner in this case that we're looking at, and I mean, if you're taking also, you'd like to look up some of these cases online. I'm dealing with Jaoko, No, Oro, and 5 others versus the Attorney General. This is a case petition number 133 of 2011. Okay, you can find that online. And now let's go to petitioner number 2, Philip Ngumo Gashoka. What happened to Philip Ngumo Gashoka? Remember, for the first petitioner, he said, I was organizing a burial for my brother. They picked me up, took me to the police station. They took me to my house. After that, they took me to Railway Police Station. They took me to Spring Valley Police Station. Then they took me to Nyayo House Torture Chambers, where I was actually tortured. Okay. Now, the second petitioner says that he was arrested on 29th of August 1990 at his shop in Nyeri town, and he was arrested by the then Deputy Provincial Criminal Investigation Officer, Mr. David Kipkemboi Koril, and then taken to his office. At Koril's office, the petitioner said that he was issued with a death threat by Mr. Korir with regard to information held by him relating to the outlawed Mwakenya movement and the alleged misappropriation by the then Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Elijah Mwangale, of funds within the coffee industry. Do you realize how Kenya works? He was being accused of having information on how the Minister of Agriculture had misappropriated funds within the coffee industry. The more things change, the more they remain the same in Kenya. Anyway, after this, he said that he was transferred to Muiga police station and he was held there for 6 days in a cold cell without proper food, a blanket or sleeping mat, and he only received bread and tea once a day for sustenance. He was then taken to Nyeri police station where an identification parade was conducted and he was thereafter remanded in custody. His case is that after his ordeal at Nyeri police station, he was then bundled into a car and driven to a place that he later learned was the Nyayo House Torture Chambers, and he was held in a waterlogged cell in the basement of Nyayo House for 5 days without food. Now, about 10 days later, he was then paraded before a panel of 11 armed soldiers and interrogated about the Mwakenya movement and the alleged misappropriation of coffee funds in Nyeri district. For the days he was held in Nyayo House Torture Chambers, he was periodically ordered to strip naked and he was beaten with rubber whips, broken chair pieces, tire whips and blows, slaps and kicks, and adds that after each session of torture, he was taken to a waterlogged cell where he was sprayed with hot, pressurized water. He also alleged that he was held in this cell without food, a sleeping mat, blankets, or drinking water. During that whole period, he was held incommunicado before being released without being charged in any court of law. Incommunicado basically means you cannot actually speak to any other person. You have no contact with the outside world. And after all this, he was still not charged with any offense before the court of law. So upon his release, he went to the Mathare Consolata Hospital in Nyeri, and it was found that he was suffering from severe headaches, malaria, high blood pressure, mental fatigue, pneumonia, and broken toes and fingers, which prognosis led to his admission at the hospital for 1.5 months. And he also sought orders showing that he had actually, his constitutional rights had been violated and he should have received damages for that. Okay. Now, the third petitioner in this case was one Mr. Pius John Njogu Nguo. And according to Mr. Pius John Njogu Nguo, he says that on 10th July 1990, he was arrested at Eva's Cafe along Haile Selassie Avenue, Nairobi, by persons he believed to be special branch police officers. Special branch was a branch within the police, and these are the guys who would come and pick you up. They were like the DCI, you know, but it was a branch within the CID, because before we had DCI, it used to be Criminal Investigation Department, the CID. So special branch were the guys who would be given some of these tasks to come after people who are trying to agitate for freedoms. Now, according to Mr. Ngo, he said that he was taken to Kamukunji police station and he was held incommunicado for 14 days. After that, he was taken to the Criminal Investigations Department, CID headquarters, which were based at Lower Milimani Road. And while there, he was interrogated by a number of policemen. He was photographed and his fingerprints were taken. He was then informed that he will be arraigned in court for due process to follow, but that never happened, as he was subsequently released without charge. 3 days later, he was rearrested after his release by police officers who broke into his house, and he was taken to Waithaka District Officer's office at Dagoretti and later transferred to Central Police Station. After that, he was blindfolded and bundled into a car and taken to a dark cell, which he later learned was at the Nyayo House torture chambers. He claims that he was held at Nyayo House for 3 days incommunicado and without food. On the 4th day, he was taken to the 24th floor of the building, where he was paraded before a group of special branch police officers. And while there, he claimed that his hands were tied behind a chair, and he was threatened on his alleged anti-government associations, and that after interrogation, he was locked up in a cold cell for another 2 days without food, a sleeping mat, blankets, or drinking water, and as a result, he developed acute asthma. Now, at the end of the 2 days in the cold cell, he alleged then that a senior superintendent of police by the name Opio ordered that he be taken to Kenyatta National Hospital for treatment, and after that, he was returned to Nyayo House and was released on the condition that he would report to the same place at least twice a week, which he claims he did for 2 months, and he was then discharged. It was his case that upon his discharge, he was made to sign a document stating that he would not author a book or narrate his ordeal to anybody, including the media, whether print or electronic. And he also sought a declaration that his rights had been violated. The fourth petitioner, because remember we said there are 6 petitioners in this case, was called Samson Wendot Kimoi. Okay? Now, according to Mr. Samson Wendot Kimoi, he claimed that he had also been arrested by the police and he was tortured. Okay? Are we good with the music? Okay. Let's see if you're good with the music. Let's just play one song or two. And then if you're good with that, we come back and we continue looking at this case. This case is going to reveal so much about how the government worked in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and whether we are going back to those dark times. So let's try this one more time.
Power Radio. Tune in and power up. Power Radio. Tune in and power up.
Okay, seems we are still having a problem with our music, but that's fine. Now let's look at the next person who was one of the petitioners. Now, the petitioner number 6 actually, was Susan Wangoi Mirugi. Now, for Susan, Susan actually filed this matter on behalf of her late husband, okay? She filed the matter as the wife of the late Mirugi Kariuki, and she claimed that her husband was illegally and unlawfully detained for having differing opinions with the government of the day. He stated that on one night in October 1986, officers from Nakuru police station stormed their home and destroyed important documents such as her children's birth certificates and school testimonials. She added that her children were traumatized by this incident and they feared attending school the following day for fear of their lives. She further stated in her petition that the officers said in harsh tones that they had not found what they were looking for and as such would strike on another day to look for it. Now, Susan said that another search was conducted on their home on or about December 1990, and again, important documents were destroyed on purpose and others carried away, and to date, these documents have never been returned. She further claimed that after this search, her late husband, Mr. Mirugi Kariuki, was arrested and charged with treason, and she was transferred from Rift Valley Province to go and work in Central Province. It is her case that this transfer was not in her interests and the children's interests, and they were still young and attending school in Rift Valley. Now, Susan was actually a nurse at a government hospital at that time, and she alleged that her salary was withheld for 6 months. Her colleagues were warned not to associate with her, and one of the children was denied admission to class 1 because she was a spouse of a man who was classified as anti-government. Now, the other petitioner, Mr. Sampson, for his case, on or about 15th of October 1986, he was arrested at Bondeni in Nakuru town, and he was then taken to Bondeni police station by special branch police officers. He was then blindfolded and driven for several hours, eventually landing in a dark cell at what he came later to learn was a Nyayo House torture chambers. Now, before daybreak, the petitioner claimed that he was taken to the 24th floor in the building, and he was presented before a panel led by a Mr. James Opio, who asked him to confess on his relationship with one Koigi Wawamwere, Karimi Nduthu, and Kang'ethe Mungai, who are alleged to be saboteurs and anti-government. Now, while he was before that panel, he stated that he was ordered to strip naked. He was slapped and he was beaten using rubber whips, broken chair pieces, kicks and blows, which sessions he alleged were repeated for the 14 days, and he was held at Nyayo House. He also alleged that after each of these sessions, he will be returned to a dark, waterlogged cell where he would be sprayed with pressurized water for several hours while naked. And it is also his case that for these 14 days, he was kept without food, sleeping mats, blankets, or drinking water. Now, he confirmed that on the 26th of August 1986, he was charged with sedition, but he denied the charges. He was then returned to Nyayo House and was subjected to more torture, and that between the 15th of August 1986 and the 29th August 1986, when he was released, he was held incommunicado. Now, after he was released, he asserted that he was warned never to narrate his ordeal to anyone or the media in whichever form, and it is on the above grounds that he now sought the orders before the court. Now, the other petitioner stated that on or about 19th of May 1986, he was arrested by special branch officers who were accompanied by policemen in plain clothes and was taken to Nakuru special branch offices, where he claims he was beaten and starved for about 17 days without being informed of the reasons for his arrest. The petitioner also claimed that at these offices he was asked by the police superintendent known as Koskei and Mugwiru why he was publishing and distributing anti-government leaflets in and around Eldama Ravine Township. He also claimed he was severely beaten with rubber whips and broken chair pieces, slaps, kicks, blows, and he was starved for another 2 weeks and given the option to save himself from further torture by admitting to the publication and distribution of the said leaflets. Now, after 18 days of severe torture, he said that he admitted to the distribution of the leaflets, and he was then transferred to the Criminal Investigation Department headquarters in Nairobi, after which he was taken to court on 6th of June 1986 and charged with sedition. He alleged that he pleaded not guilty but he was remanded and his bail was set at 100,000 with 2 sureties of the same amount, and he was given a condition to report at the Nakuru Criminal Investigation Department office twice a week. Now, according to him, he said that the charges against him were later dropped by the state for lack of evidence, and he was released, and upon his release, he heard that the special branch officers were looking for him again, and this is when he made the decision to escape to Tanzania through the Isibania border point, and in July 1988, he was granted asylum in Sweden, where he has been residing until the time when this matter was being filed in court. And he also sought orders to show that he had actually been, his rights had actually been violated. Guys, that is a story of the 6. That is a story of the 6. And next, you're going to be looking at what was the government's case? What was their response? What did the government actually say in response? Now, according to the government, a replying affidavit was sworn by Julius Ndegwa, and Julius Ndegwa was a senior deputy commissioner of police, and he saw this affidavit on 27 September 2011. And according to him, he said they had no records to show that the petitioners were ever arrested and detained. So, for instance, for the case of Jackson Ooro, he said there was no evidence that Jackson was ever arrested and detained in either Kisumu or Spring Valley police station or any other police station in Kenya. He also said that the Kenya police is professional in executing its statutory mandate, which it does both professionally and proficiently, and it is against police policy to torture suspects in any manner while in police custody. He added that the Nyayo House torture chambers are alien to the Kenya police, special branch officers, or any other police force, and that the allegations by the petitioner were unfounded. So basically, he was saying the police have no idea. What is this Nyayo House torture chambers you're talking about? Atutambui, we have no idea what you're talking about. Now, he said that the OB, which is the occurrence book at the police station, you know, anytime you go to a police station, you are booked under the OB. So they take your name and they indicate what they've booked you for. He said that according to the OB, those books are destroyed every 10 years. And the cell register records, because if you're put in a cell, there's another book now that they show these are the people who are in the cells, okay? Those records are destroyed after 5 years. And so he says for him, this is 2011, it will be impractical to locate and retrieve or authenticate the relevant entries in the said books and registers, since the incidents had occurred almost 22 years previous. In any event, he said that the petitioner, in this case Jackson, had already pleaded guilty to the offense that he was charged with, and that action, according to the deputy police commissioner, that action of pleading guilty was voluntary, and therefore Jackson should not come around later to state that his constitutional rights were violated. Now, the court noted that there were no responses on record regarding the issues raised in all the other petitions above. Now, the court first began by looking at this, and this was Justice Isaac Lenaola of the High Court of Kenya, who is now a judge at the Supreme Court. And this decision, he was a judge who sat on it, but it was delivered on his behalf by Justice Mumbi Ngugi. Now, when matters go before a court, the court, of course, has to say, okay, what are the issues here so that we can determine exactly what we are dealing with. So the court said that, number one, petitioners alleged that they had been arrested, tortured, kept in custody for varying periods of time, and released without charge. The second issue was that the petitioners had said they were not arrested, not tortured physically, not charged in court, but were psychologically tortured. There was an allegation of psychological torture, okay? Then, there were also cases where they were arrested, subjected to torture, charged in court, and released, okay? Now, the court began by noting that the replying affidavit of the Deputy Commissioner of Police was not a sufficient answer to any of the serious claims that were being made by these petitioners. The court said that this affidavit was generalized and was escapist. And this is what the judge said. To my mind, it was a non-answer to either of the complaints made. In any event, although I gave the respondent, who is Attorney General, an opportunity to cross-examine each of the petitioners, nothing came out of the cross-examination that would sway my mind to disbelieve them. It's also instructive that although I allowed the respondent an opportunity to file written submissions, I see none on any of the files before me. Okay? The court found that with that, the only question that remained was to determine were these people's rights actually violated. Now, before I go to what the court determined, let's look at what has been happening of late. We know that certain people were abducted by the police. Some of the police were in plain clothes. Actually, in almost all instances, the police were in plain clothes, and they were picked from different places. There's a lot of similarity in how things happened in the 80s, 90s to how they've happened now in these Occupy Parliament protests, right? In 2024, people have been picked up from their homes. People have been picked up at a restaurant. People have been picked up on the road. People have been picked up from work. And it's the same MO that we are seeing over and over again, right? Now, similarly, we are also seeing that these people were being taken, to places which were not police stations. And actually, it's only very few of them who later turned up at a police station. I think I remember the case for Gabriel Oguda is that he turned up then at a police station. I think it was somewhere either Kajiado or Narok, having been taken in Nairobi, right? So there's a lot of similarity in how that is being done. Plainclothes police are being used. These police are actually not identifying themselves. There have been instances of torture, even for the groups we have now. I think everyone has probably seen the case, for instance, of Joshua Okayo, who was taken by the police, and he has described the torture that he was taken through, the beatings, and he was thrown out of a moving car onto River Mathira, right? Shad as well, Shad Kiprono has also given his story about how he was taken. So what is he saying about us, man? Is it that we have not changed? Have we not seen a change in how government operates since the 80s and 90s? Are we seeing a repeat of us going back to that period? These are the questions they're going to be answering. And the question was, the court was actually being asked, is such conduct acceptable? Now, one thing I need to let you know is that normally in law, there's something we call the statute of limitation, okay? The limitation of actions. And under the law, there are certain actions that should only be brought within a particular time. So for instance, if you're an employee and you want to sue your employer, or your employee, you want to sue your employee, your former employee, you have to do it within 3 years. If you come after 3 years, you're told there's a limitation of actions, all right? You have then these questions of maybe contracts. You're generally the limitation of action 7 years. However, when it comes to constitutional violations, there is no limitation of action. Someone can actually go to court today and say, I was tortured in 1963, and the court will actually give them audience, because that is how important matters of human rights are taken in this country. If you look at the Constitution of Kenya, it was when the Constitution was being prepared and it was being framed, they knew that at some point, people would need to come forward to get justice. You can imagine if you are subjected to these things under the government of President Moi, it will be almost impossible for you to then go to court, considering that at the time, the president was the one appointing judges, okay? The president had almost total and complete power. The judiciary at that time was a stooge of the presidency. Many of these people were taken to court. Some of the magistrates and judges never asked them, how long have you been held? Some of them were tortured. Some of them had injuries. None of those judicial officers actually took notice of that and said, hey, why has this person been injured? The prosecutors who prosecuted those cases, They saw these people come before the court with injuries. They never raised it. They never dealt with it. For them, they were just doing their job, you know? So that's why there is no limitation of actions. That at any point, a person can actually come and claim my constitutional rights were violated, and for that, I deserve to be compensated for that. Now, the court began by actually looking at what the old constitution provided for, which we call the Lancaster Constitution. Okay, this was a constitution that Kenya got, and it was subjected to so many amendments. Guys, BBI is not a new thing. There were very many BBIs that were done. There were very many BBIs that were done there before, and what happened is the constitution was mutilated so much that even some of the provisions that were there did not make any sense. And that is why one of the big things that people wanted to do was to make sure, hey, we need to actually get a new constitution that reflects the will of the people. Okay? Sasa sini kunywa maji manze. This was supposed to be radio. It's turning into a podcast. So I'm gonna go silent for 30 seconds. I just take some water. And then when I come back, we talk about what are some of the considerations that the court had.
This is Sheria Dive on Power Radio with me, James WaNjeri, where we take a deep dive into the law, discussing all things legal and educating you on how the law impacts your life.
Yes, welcome back. Remember, today we're talking about abductions, we're talking about detentions, we're talking about people who actually went to court and said, this is what happened to me. And remember, those who do not learn from the past, those who do not learn from history, are bound to repeat the mistakes of the past. Why should you and I be vigilant in ensuring that human rights and democracy, rule of law, that those are things that are actually upheld in the nation of Kenya? Now, the court began by noting that in the old constitution, section 72, the law was that no person shall be deprived of his personal liberty, save as may be authorized by law. Okay? A person who is arrested or detained shall be informed as soon as reasonably practicable in a language that he understands of the reason for his arrest or detention. Now, for those people who had been arrested or detained, they have to be informed of the purpose of bringing them before a court, okay, in execution of the order of a court, or upon reasonable suspicion of having committed or being about to commit a criminal offense and they are not released, they should be brought before a court as soon as is reasonably practicable. And where they are not brought before a court within 24 hours of their arrest or from the commencement of their detention, or within 14 days of their arrest or detention, where they are arrested or detained upon reasonable suspicion of having committed or were about to commit an offense, the burden of proving that the person arrested or detained has been brought before a court as soon as is reasonably practicable would rest upon the person alleging that the provisions of this subsection had been complied with. Okay? Very nice. It leads very nice. But they were not doing it. You had to be brought to court within a specific period of time. But that was not happening. The court also considered that at the time, Kenya also was part of some international instruments of law. For instance, the United Nations Convention Against Torture and other cruel, inhuman, or degrading treatment or punishment, and the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, which we call the Banjul Charter, they all establish that treatment is considered inhuman when it causes intense physical or mental suffering. Inhuman acts will amount to torture when they are used to deliberately cause serious and cruel suffering, and treatment or punishment will be degrading if it humiliates and debases a person beyond that which is usual from punishment. All right? Now, what the court is saying here is that when we are determining the treatment you've received, let's say from the police, when we look at that treatment, number one, did it cause you intense physical or mental suffering? And of course, in terms of physical suffering, we're talking about pain. You've seen some of the stories of these petitioners that they were beaten with whips. Okay? They were beaten. The Nyahunyo, this is where the Nyahunyo became famous. They were beaten with whips. They were beaten with broken pieces of wood. All right. Has it caused you mental suffering? We know that there is also psychological anguish, okay, that you can be exposed to. Then, in terms of torture, has this action caused serious and cruel suffering? Okay. In terms of being degrading, we're talking about, does this treatment humiliate you? Now imagine some of these people arrested, they are husbands, okay, they have wives, they have children, and you're being taken before a panel of people and you're being told to strip naked. They actually ask you to strip naked and you stand there before all of them. What is the purpose of that in police work? To ask a man or a woman to actually strip naked before you. Now, the court also considered that we have questions of personal liberty. Because for many of these people, you'll discover that a lot of them were deprived of their personal liberty and they were never taken to court. And even those that were taken to court, they were taken to court after a very long time. Now, the court noted that Samson Wendot and Peter Kavila were charged in court. And for Samson, his charges were dropped, though he was granted bail. And for Peter Kavila, his case did not proceed to full trial. And the court found that their right to a speedy trial was not violated because their matters never evolved into full trial. However, the court was of the view that the petitioner's right to fair hearing was violated because when a person is tortured, taken to court, charged with an offense, and a few days later the charges are dropped or no evidence is tendered to support the charge, it is obvious that the charges were trumped up to further torture the persons psychologically, and that can never in any society that believes in the rule of law be equated to a fair trial. All right? If someone has been picked up, tortured, taken to court, charged with an offense, and then the charges are dropped or no evidence is provided to support the charge, that cannot be something that is allowed, or that cannot be something that we agree to in a society such as ours, a society where we are saying we believe in the rule of law. That cannot amount to a fair trial. Now, one of the other things that the investigators were asking them had a lot to do with their association. Who have you been associating with? Now, on the freedom of association, that right is hinged on the liberty to assemble and to pursue common interest. Okay? And that goes to you as a person because that is your right to choose. Now, for all these people, they were arrested based on suspicions of their anti-government associations. And yet, the government did not actually go forward and prove those suspicions to the required standard in law. Instead, what they did was they used torture as a tool of curtailing that freedom. The court was of the view that such conduct cannot be excused by the court, and therefore the government infringed on the rights of those petitioners, even in line with that old constitution. Now, for mental torture, remember, Susan Wangoi Mirugi was actually coming to court to say, the police came to my house, they took my documents and my children's documents, they took my children's birth certificates, they took books, kidogo kidogo, they came and picked my husband, kidogo kidogo, they transferred me from Rift Valley to Central, my children were small, they were going to school, they came and told my fellow employees not to talk to me, to avoid me, okay? These same people then did not pay me for 6 months. I was working as a government nurse, and for 6 months, I was never actually paid a salary. And she says, I was personally tortured. Yes, I've come to file this case on behalf of my husband, but even I was tortured. As a matter of fact, she says that her child could not be admitted to class 1 because she was labeled as a child of someone who was anti-government. Part of what the government was doing was to turn the people against each other. And the court found that mental suffering is as outlawed as physical suffering. And so, even for her, her rights were actually violated. And the court looked at a case of Canada where torture was defined under the Article 1 of the United Nations Convention Against Torture. And torture actually includes the unlawful use of psychological or physical techniques to intentionally inflict severe pain and suffering on another person when such pain or suffering is inflicted by or with the consent of public officials. And that is actually the legal position in Kenya, that torture could also be mental. So I know probably the police have picked you and they've taken you through all that, and then you're like, yangu ilikuwa kidogo. No, as long as you are subjected to cruel treatment, okay, as long as they inflicted pain to your mind, as long as they use that to extract a confession or information out of you or to obtain sadistic pleasure, I think one of the now, because of the new constitution, many of the survivors of torture are actually publishing their books. And so I would encourage you. I think Nuria is probably stocking a lot of these books. Pick up some of the books by the torture survivors. And when you hear some of the stories, I remember reading a story of a gentleman who said that he would be stripped naked. And then a police officer, a lady police officer, the age of probably his daughter, would come and would begin to assault him sexually. And some of them actually had their, their private parts subjected to intense pain, beatings and all that, to the extent that there are many of them who actually cannot perform normal sexual functions to date because of some of the things that happened. And that word finua, that's where that came from. Because they would actually squeeze your nuts to try and extract information out of you. The state can be an animal. And that's why the Constitution actually guarantees your rights for you and I. We can have this show right now because of those constitutional guarantees. And you and I have a responsibility to ensure that we do not allow Kenya to get into that space where I cannot come here and speak freely. You cannot tweet freely. You cannot say whatever you want in that matatu or in your classroom or in your church. Because once those freedoms and liberties are clawed away, what happens is you have a society that then lives in fear. You have people disappearing. Today, we are learning about the stories of people who were tortured in the 80s, in the 90s. Some of us were not even alive at that time, and it almost feels like it's such a long time ago. But the 90s are only 30 years ago, which means we've had 6 election cycles only within that period. So the court found that Susan Wangui was subjected to non-physical form of torture because of her association with her husband, and this caused her mental anguish and distress. Now, what about the question of being brought to court within 24 hours? This was actually determined. There was a case of Anne Jogu and 5 others versus the Republic. And this is what the court said. I dare add, the said section is very clear and specific that the applicants can only be kept in detention or cells for up to 24 hours. At the tick of the 60th minute of the 24th hour, if they have not been brought before the court, every minute thereafter of their continued detention is an unmitigated illegality, as it is a violation of the fundamental and constitutional rights of the applicants. Upon determination that the constitutional rights of the applicants have been violated, any prosecution against them or any of them on the basis of the events for which attempted charges are being made is null and void. That is so and will remain so, irrespective of the weight of the evidence that the police might have in support of their case. This is for the simple reason that such a prosecution would be based on an illegality and a null and void case. So what was the court saying here? That if the Constitution provides that you need to be brought to court within 24 hours, if you're not brought to court within that time, then the court treats anything that was done within that time as being unconstitutional and will be very quick to dismiss those charges against you because your rights have been violated. There is an illegality that has been committed there. And this is also what this particular court held as well. Now, having found that their rights were violated, what damages do you give them? Now, remember, in court, people don't just go to court for the sake of going to court. Part of what you also do is you ask the court, give me damages. I have been hurt. This is how I've been affected. And so I need to be compensated for that. Now, the court started by looking, there was a case of Bernard WaNjeri Kinga, who sued the Attorney General. And when you sue the Attorney General, you're basically suing the state. And in that case, he had been arrested by special branch police officers who took him to his house, conducted a search, and later locked him up in Embu police station. The following day, he was transferred to Kileleshwa police station, and at about midnight that day, he was blindfolded and he was taken to the Nyayo House torture chambers. He was paraded before a panel of interrogators. He was assaulted with slaps, rubber whips, broken chair parts, kicks, and blows for his alleged involvement with the outlawed Mwakenya movement. He was also locked in a dark cell, kept without food or drinking water, and he was held incommunicado for 17 days. He was then released without any charges being preferred against him. Now, in that case, the court said that I have no hesitation in making a declaration that this person's fundamental rights and freedoms were grossly violated. Each petitioner is therefore entitled to compensation by way of general damages. So the court then said, I have considered the periods and length of time that each petitioner was kept in unlawful custody and the torture that was inflicted on them. I have also considered previous decisions of this court on the same matter. I have noted that there are awards in damages in each of the above cases, and I am persuaded on the basis of the foregoing that the final orders to be made in the consolidated petition are as follows. So for petition number 133 of 2011, the court found that his rights were violated and he was awarded 700,000 shillings as damages and compensation for the violation and contravention of his fundamental rights. All right. For petition number 68 of 2011, the court found that he was detained for 22 days at various police stations and thereafter at Nyayo House torture chambers, and he was awarded 1,100,000 as compensation. For the third petitioner, the court found that he was taken by Kenyan government service servants, agents, and or employees from 10th of July 1990 for 23 days and was held at Kamkunji police station and thereafter at Nyayo House torture chambers. He was awarded 1,150,000. The other petitioner was also found that on that 10th of July, he was held for 28 days at Spring Valley police station and thereafter he was held at Nyayo House torture chambers and he was awarded 1,400,000. Okay. For the fifth petitioner, the fourth petitioner, the court found that they were awarded 250,000 Kenya shillings for the violation of their fundamental rights and freedoms. For the fifth petitioner, the court awarded him 850,000 shillings for the violation of their rights. And for the sixth petitioner, he was awarded 900,000. The court finding that in 1986, he was held for 18 days at Nakuru police station and thereafter in Kenyan prisons. And that was the end of that case that was delivered by Justice Isaac Lenaola, and it was delivered on his behalf by Justice Mumbi Ngugi on 6th day of September 2013. Now, can I make you even sadder? A lot of these people have actually not been paid this money. The government has refused to pay the victims of torture. A lot of them are still looking to the government to pay them the amounts that they need to be paid. And it's very, very unfortunate. For many of these people, their families really, really suffered. And to date, they are still actually looking for justice to be paid some of this money that the court has so clearly determined that they need to be paid. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're listening to me right now, Kenya is a country that belongs to each and every one of us. And I'd just like to read Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya. And this has become a statement that we have all used. Article 1 of the Constitution of Kenya says, all sovereign power belongs to the people of Kenya and shall be exercised only in accordance with this Constitution. That is actually the leading guide for us as a country. That our Constitution is here, and all power actually belongs to us, the people. And that power can only be exercised in accordance with the Constitution. Now, if you look at the preamble, our Constitution, and I'm going to read this for us. We, the people of Kenya, acknowledging the supremacy of the Almighty God of all creation, honoring those who heroically struggled to bring freedom and justice to our land, proud of our ethnic, cultural, and religious diversity, and determined to live in peace and unity as one indivisible sovereign nation. Respectful of the environment, which is our heritage, and determined to sustain it for the benefit of future generations. Committed to nurturing and protecting the well-being of the individual, the family, communities, and the nation, recognizing the aspirations of all Kenyans for a government based on the essential values of human rights, equality, freedom, democracy, social justice, and the rule of law, exercising our sovereign and inalienable right to determine the form of governance of our country, and having participated fully in the making of this Constitution, adopt, enact, and give this Constitution to ourselves and to our future generations. That is the preamble of the Constitution of Kenya. Now, the reality is that even with a constitution as powerful as the one we have, the last 3 to 4 weeks have exposed a lot of things about our country. Internet shutdowns, those are things we never expected would happen in a country like Kenya. Arbitrary arrests, abductions, these are not things we thought would happen in 2024 in Kenya. But I believe that this is actually an invitation to each and every one of us. If indeed the words of that preamble, and if indeed the words of Article 1 are the words that we believe in, then we have an obligation and a responsibility to strive for that society, to strive for that country, and to demand and ensure that we get the promise of that Constitution. Now, the torture of the 1980s, the torture of the 1990s, and even the tortures of the 60s and the 70s, because even the first government actually was involved in the killing of individuals, arbitrary arrests, and that has been the story of Kenya. But what the young people are coming out to say is, we want a different Kenya. We want a Kenya that actually works for all of us. We don't want to leave Kenya and go live elsewhere. Places where we are going to be subjected to racism, places where we are going to be subjected to abuse, places where we leave Kenya alive and probably come back dead. We do not want. If you're going to die, let us die here in our soil, because this is home. That is what young people are asking for. And because of that, it falls upon you and I to make sure that that is a society we want, and that is a society that we ask for. So, what is the role we have to play? You and I have to ensure that cases of violation of human rights, cases of violation of constitutional provisions are not allowed. The Constitution guarantees your and my right to freedom of speech, to the extent that that speech is not used to incite hatred or is not used to demean others. You have the freedom to speak in this country. You have the freedom to see what is wrong and to say this is wrong and this is the right thing to do, and to pursue that. Those are the freedoms that we have. Right? So, as we mourn the dead, I think as of now, people who've died in the protests are more than 50. More than 50. And as we think of all that we've lost to senseless police killings, Beasley Kogi, Rex Kanyeki, David Chege, all these people, and these are just some of the names that can just pop into my mind now, but there are so many other people. Children shot, dead, women dead. And today, even as we look at the case of the bodies that are being picked from the quarry, we need to ask ourselves a lot of questions as a country. And we need to ask, is this actually the sort of society that we want to live in? Is this the sort of place that we want to be in? And the Constitution gives you and I the power to actually participate in how we are going to be governed, and in how the powers that be, or those we've entrusted with the sovereign power of Kenyans, can exercise that authority. Now, I'd like to just pay homage to some of the people who were victims of police brutality and abduction, and we could never actually name all of them. When we look at some of the people who were charged as being members of the Mokenya movement, we have WaNjeri Kihoro, Kiongo Maina, Mwandawiro Mganga, Katama Mkangi, Wahome Mutahi, Lumumba Odenda, Oduoro Ngweng, Karimi Nduthu, Tirop Kitur, Kangede Wamungai. Now in 1992, and those are just some of the ones I can name, in 1992, some women from central Kenya, mothers whose sons had been arrested for involvement with the Mokenya movement, they gathered at Uhuru Park after their efforts to have the Attorney General Amos Wako release their sons failed. Now, these mothers included Nobel Peace Laureate Wangari Maathai and Monica Wangu Wamwere, who was Koigi Wamwere's mother. And you remember that at the time, Koigi Wamwere had actually been imprisoned. They staged a hunger strike at the park for several months before the Moi administration sent security forces to chase the women away. And the women retaliated by stripping naked. This caused most of the security officers to flee, as it was considered a curse in many Kenyan communities for one to see a mother's nudity. By July 1993, all detainees had been freed. And today, the section of Uhuru Park where the women had pitched tent is now called Freedom Corner. So anytime you go to Uhuru Park, pass by Freedom Corner, and remember, the only reason all these detainees were actually released was because of people who stood up, people who took a stand, and people who did what had to be done. And women who are even willing to take off their clothes in broad daylight just so that the cry for their children could be heard. All right? Thank you very much for keeping me company on this show. We are here with Flozy, wondering what happened to the music. What actually happened to the music? But it's been nice having you guys listening in. I want to just look at. Let me check. Flozy, we need to check if there's anyone who's asking questions. I'm looking at my Twitter. Damaris says interesting pointers going on here. Fantastic. Thank you so much, Damaris, for listening in. I'm gonna check YouTube. This is usually faster because we'd be playing music right now, but leo imebidi tujikakamwe. Yeah? Inabidi. But we're gonna be okay. All of us in studio are fine. Please do not be worried for us. We are fine as of now. I see the comments. Is it possible to make Eric Wainaina's song the national anthem? What would it take? I think we have a fantastic national anthem. And by the way, my goodness, did you attend the Freedom concert? Oh my God. The Freedom concert that happened last Sunday at Uhuru Park. Fantastic. Every time you want to give up on this country, you get some of these moments where you're like, this is why we are doing what we're doing. The performances were amazing. Just watching Eric Wainaina perform all his songs. Did you know that actually Nchi ya Kitu Kidogo was a song that was released in 2001? And the story continues. It's like nothing has changed. 23 years later, tuko pale pale. One of the most heartbreaking things I heard is someone went to the police to report that, hey, my son has actually been abducted. And the police said, okay, sasa unajua gari ina mafuta, so tupatie kitu kidogo so that we go and try and sort that out. Can you imagine? Can you just imagine that? So Kenya, a lot has still not changed. But remember, as I always say, this is our home. We have no other home. And we're going to make this home work for us. So, as we come to a close on this show, allow me at this moment to read for us the words of our national anthem. All right? This is our national anthem. O God of all creation, bless this, our land and nation. Justice be our shield and defender. May we dwell in unity, peace, and liberty. Plenty be found within our borders. Let one and all arise, with hearts both strong and true. Service be our earnest endeavor, and our homeland of Kenya, the heritage of splendor, firm may we stand to defend. Let all, with one accord, in common bond united, build this our nation together. And the glory of Kenya, the fruit of our labor, fill every heart with thanksgiving. Ladies and gentlemen, that's it from us here at Power Radio. Sheria Drive is over. Have a fantastic weekend. Please be safe out there. And remember, as we said, just share that location with someone close to you. Yeah? So that in case of anything, we all know where to find you. God bless you so much for keeping us company and for being with us on this. We appreciate you. God bless you and God bless Kenya. And even as we continue to retrieve bodies from the abandoned quarry at Mukuru, Kwanjenga, we just want to pray that all these people will rest in peace, and also that the truth of what actually happened to them will be discovered. Thank you. God bless Kenya.